Join my grandkids with their combined backgrounds in DNA, journalism, and law as Jeremy and Kelly share tales of injustice and intrigue with a focus on true crime in the South. So sit back, grab a glass of sweet tea, and welcome to Southern Fried Homicide.
All right, well, thanks for joining. We know that there's been a little bit of a delay recording this one. We're still getting the kinks out of all of this. It's still a hobby, so we're working on trying to get on a good, reliable schedule for releasing a podcast. But
yeah, we all have families and other jobs, and this is just something that's kind of like a passion project,
yeah.
I guess.
So again, though, thank you for joining us. This week's episode, well, this month's episode, that is, it's not actually a Memphis crime for the first time, but, well, technically it's not a Memphis crime. We're going to be discussing something that happened in Horn Lake, Mississippi, the 2017 death of Jessica Johnson. Now, Horn Lake is technically a suburb of Memphis. When you look up the crime rates for Horn Lake, it's not as violent. It's not as big as Memphis, for one thing. It's less populated. It's not known for its violent crime the way Memphis is. When I checked the crime ratings and the crime statistics, the worst crime they had there was property-related crime. I'm talking, burglary, arson, theft, things like that. So they're not used to murders, rapes, things of that nature. So that's why, in particular, this case, this 2017 death of Jessica Johnson, was shocking for the area. And while it has officially been deemed a suicide, we and many others, including Jessica Johnson's family and her friends, many of them think there's, more to the case.
Yes, this is actually a case that one of our listeners brought to our attention. I honestly had never heard of it before.
I hadn't either.
And sadly,
it's local, and I hadn't heard of it.
But this case also reminded me a little bit of our first case, Nancy Little, because of the way she was found in an unusual position.
Right.
It's just very unusual. So this kind of ties into that same odd case that this technically, I guess, is solved by the police standpoint because they deemed it a suicide. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with you. I thought the same thing. But before we get into that, as always, we like to talk a little bit about the person before delving into the crime. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about Jessica? I remember, you have a slight connection. I remember back in the day you used to work with some people who also knew her.
Yeah, when I was going through social media, I saw that we had, quote unquote, friends in common with a lot of Jessica's friends. And then I found out that some of my coworkers, or my former coworkers, were actually good friends with her. So I did reach out to them and talk to them a little bit about this. But Jessica, she was born in August of 1981 to David and Linda Johnson. She graduated from Horn Lake High School, so she was born and raised in the Horn Lake area. She worked at a family-owned trucking company called Fulmer Logistics Services, and she had one sister named Kayla, so relatively small family. At the time of her death, she was 37 years old. She had two children, a son named Colin and a daughter named Eden. And her friends and family all describe her as being super bubbly, life of the party, fun-loving, energetic, but she was also known to be glamorous. You were not going to see her without being all dolled up, makeup,
She's very
hair.
beautiful.
Yes, a lot of her social media posts, the selfies, she's always well put together. And that's just something I think she was really known for, was how
she presented
attractive
herself.
she was and how she presented herself to the public. One of her friends, B, she described her as being an amazing soul. So she was really loved by her friends and family, obviously. It's just a big part of her identity, though, was how well she was always put together. So that will play into this story a little bit later. She was also checking in with her parents. She lived at home with her parents at this time, and she would touch base with them regularly, routinely, saying, I'm going here, I'm going there.
Yeah.
Actually,
you don't see that a lot for grown adults.
No.
Checking in with their parents that way.
Independent.
Right.
But in fact, the night before, or not really the night before, just prior to her death, she told her mother that she'd be home soon. But I think the night before, she had FaceTimed with her daughter to let her know the same thing. Mommy's coming home.
Right.
And that was around June 1st. And her family, the last time I physically saw her was May 31st.
Right. And she told them that she was going to be staying with her on again, off again boyfriend at the time. We're going to call him G. That's what she called him. And nobody seemed to really like him very much, did they?
Yeah, he was not, I guess, ideal from her family's perspective. He was a guy that had run into some trouble with drugs. He had tattoos, like from
all over.
Yeah, from neck to who knows where. And just somebody, her family was not super excited that she was dating, but they dated on and off for several years. And so their family was a little bit confused, like, why was she so attracted to him?
Right.
And several of them made comments in some documentaries that I've watched that said that they felt like she was trying to save him. And, you know, it reminds me of when we were growing up, Mom and Dad would tell us that, like, illustration about someone who, when they were talking about our association and who we'd hang out with our friends, they would say, you know, if you're wearing all white and you walk into a room full of dirt, the white is not going to rub off on the dirt. The dirt is going to rub off on the white. So that always stuck with me. And I think that's what happened here. She went in with good intentions. Like, I want to help G. I want to help get him clean. And
it had a negative impact on her.
Yes. And apparently that was kind of a habit that she'd fallen into with previous relationships, was that she would go in with, you know, good intentions, but the people that she was surrounding herself with will rub it off on her instead.
Right. Yeah, it sounded like a really difficult relationship. On again, off again for several years. Lots of arguing, possibly some abuse. Allegedly, Jessica told people that if anything ever happened to her, to look at the boyfriend. So that's pretty ominous. Authorities even met with one of Jessica's friends who claimed that Jessica and G had had a severe altercation the day before she was found. That Jessica had called her friend, like, look, we're having this terrible fight. Can you come pick me up from this house? And the friend drove all the way out there. And for some reason, Jessica changed her mind and didn't go with her. She ended up staying in the house. I wish she had gone with her. Things could have been very different today if that had happened.
Sure her friend probably has a lot of mixed emotions about that, too.
So where the fight took place, they were at this house. Her boyfriend, G, had a best friend and G would occasionally live at this guy's house.
Yeah, he seemed to be kind of a nomad, living all over the place.
So they're at her boyfriend's friend's house. They have this big fight. We're just going to call him the homeowner, I guess. I don't want to name names. We're going to call him the homeowner.
Well, you read earlier an article where he didn't want his name to be out there because he was receiving death threats.
Right. So the homeowner, where this fight took place, he said, you know, they got in a fight. She was being very dramatic. He said that she was threatening to take off her shoelaces and hurt herself, and that the boyfriend kind of just shrugged it off and whatever, and they just closed the door on her, and that was it. We'll go back to that later, but that threat is very specific, that she's going to use her shoelaces to hurt herself. I think that's strange. But anyway, the point being, this relationship just sounded bad all around. It sounded very toxic.
Most definitely. And this house was, I would say, a house of ill repute. It was not known, well, it was known to be a house of drugs activity, with selling, buying drugs. So
she was found there.
That's where she was found, unfortunately. On June 2nd, a mail carrier was delivering mail and
around 10:30 in the morning.
Mid-morning, and found Jessica kneeling in a kneeling position with two shoestrings tied around her neck and then tied to the mailbox. And this is not like a super tall mailbox. This is a standard 38.
It was 38 inches tall.
Yes, a little over 3 feet tall. And the mail carrier was shocked, obviously. Right. But instead of calling 911 or the police, the mail carrier made an odd decision to call her fellow mail carrier, or her, I don't know if it was male or female, but they called their coworker who came, on
So
site.
another male person comes.
And that person takes pictures of Jessica. And these are the pictures that you can see online. They're all over the internet, unfortunately, of Jessica in this really position that's so odd, so sad. But eventually the police were called. The police come, and the family told me that no one from the homeowner's house came outside when there's all these police cars
Showing up in front of his house.
showing up. They're parked all around the mailbox area. The local news station was there, but
They never came out. That's really weird.
it is very odd. If something was happening in front of my house,
Yeah, you come out. What are you
right?
doing?
Remember, that made me think of our grandmother. Do you remember when she lived at the other house and
Oh, yeah.
late at night?
And she thought kids were breakdancing in the street. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
And so, yes,
You pay attention to what's going on in
you
your.
look and you're paying attention to your street, to your neighborhood. That's the natural instinct, is to come outside.
Yep.
So that's weird that he didn't. But the police, when they eventually showed up, I thought this was crazy. You talked to Jessica's mother when the police came
to their house
home.
to report, the sad ending of Jessica, but they came to her and said, "Oh, we found her. She's deceased, and it was by suicide." The end.
Immediately, that is what they jumped to.
Not that it was a mysterious-looking death. To just right away went to suicide, and you'll see events that follow with evidence and such that supports the fact that they just right away called it a suicide and really didn't do much with it after that.
It's just crazy. I just don't understand. There's so much to unpack with all this going on. First off, how do you physically hang yourself from a 38-inch tall mailbox using shoelaces? Like, I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah, the mailbox is short, so I don't get that, especially because we drove there to look at the location, and there are big trees everywhere.
Right.
It's I don't want to say it's forested, but there's
a lot of trees.
A lot of big trees. They're not little twigs. These are trees that were in reaching distance.
Yeah.
There was a pond across the street. A few houses down was that house that was selling
guns.
weapons.
Yeah.
I don't know. There seemed to be,
It's just odd.
if you were going to harm yourself with some element of nature or being
Why
outside,
would
there
you
were some
choose
other
this?
options besides a 3-foot tall mailbox. Now, shoelaces, I found that bizarre as well. I did look into cases online to see, is it common for shoelaces to be used for suicide? And there were a fair amount of articles and cases. There was one example, I believe it was a lady in Arizona. She had been arrested. She was put in the back of the van and was being transported wherever. And she managed to take her shoelaces off in the back and hang herself in the back before they made it to prison or jail or what have you. So it is possible to use.
But she had no other
shoelaces.
option. It's something that
True.
I guess if you're desperate, that's why they don't let prisoners have shoes with shoelaces, because they don't want to give them anything. But like you said, there was a lot of, if you were going to hurt yourself, there was a lot of other options that would have made more sense than shoelaces.
And
on a
remember,
mailbox.
the house was known for drugs.
Right.
So if you,
It just seems impossible.
you would think if you were, that would be an option too, right?
Yeah.
You could overdose on something intentionally.
And I don't see physically how it's possible, because when you're running out of air, it's the body's natural response is to breathe. So, if you're in that position,
It seemed like you would just stand up.
Stand up. Yeah. I don't see how that's possible at all. But the way she was found also was just unusual for
And
her.
the stuff around her, her purse was there. Open. Her cell phone was there. She was not wearing shoes, but the shoes were found on the property. And the property, I meant to look this up, but it's probably a couple acres. It's
a big property.
It's a corner lot inside a subdivision. But the driveway goes to the house. You pull in straight. There's the house. To the left of the house is where the mailbox is. Wait, it's far. It's not.
And it's not facing the front door.
It's not
facing the side of the
exactly. It's in
house.
an odd position.
Yeah.
The mail. I don't know why the mailbox is over there.
either.
You would think it'd be by the driveway, but it's not. And that's where it was at the time as well. And thankfully, the mailbox has been replaced.
Yeah.
Which I found. I don't know what's the right word. I found it to be. Help me out here, Kelly. What am I thinking? I thought it was. I'm glad that they replaced it because I had seen
It would be haunting to have that there all the time.
and I'd seen a lot of coverage on documentaries and stuff. And they go back to the house and they
Show the same mailbox.
The police officer, or the detective, or whomever the consultant is pushing on the mailbox, and there's all it's just like I don't know.
It's a little grim.
Yes, so I'm glad to see they replaced it. I told Linda that they replaced it, and it made her made her a little happy as well. That it's not just staying out there as a shrine of some sort.
Something that was you mentioned her shoes. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but you said that they were away from her body, but they were splattered with blood. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I thought it was interesting also that we talked before about how glamorous she was. She was always dolled up. When they found her, she had on an odd combination of clothes. She was very stylish, so they said it didn't really look like her style, and she didn't have any makeup on. Mm-hmm. And that was not like her.
No, and she was 5'4", so she's not tall. I mean, you're what? How tall are you?
I'm 5'3".
So I don't know. The whole shoestring thing is bizarre to me with the mailbox.
Yeah.
The combination of the two, especially. Her family obviously did not believe it to be suicide. They said she cared too much about how she looked, not in like necessarily a vain.
But her appearance mattered to her.
Right. She would not put herself on display like that. And that's how her family felt like Jessica was left as a display. With the way she was positioned, everything was just super odd. And, she was at this house that was known for drugs.
Right.
And in her
toxicology
report, they did find elements of, I think, meth and Xanax.
Right.
I don't know how much was in there, so I don't know if it was enough to, and I don't know anybody who has suffered from that personally. I don't know how it makes people act or what, but that was in her system. So there are a lot of people who are skeptical, who online, they say, oh, she definitely did commit suicide because the drugs would have made her do that.
Her mother said that Xanax was her drug of choice, and that if the police had said, oh, she died from
an overdose
of Xanax, she said that maybe she could have believed that, but never this way, the way that she was found. And every single friend and family member that was interviewed said they didn't feel like it was possible at all for her to have done this. She loved her kids too much, and that she wouldn't have, like you said, put herself on display in this way.
So the official cause of death was asphyxiation. I don't know if I say it right.
Asphyxia?
Due to ligature hanging. So that's what's on record. And it's and the death certificate is stamped or typed as suicide.
And when you spoke to her mother, when the police and when they, like you said, when they reported her death, they didn't say that there was they suspected foul play or anything like that?
Right away, they said suicide.
That's crazy. I think that her family thinks, and I think that because of where she was found, because they found drugs in her system, I think the police are just shrugging it off. They're like, oh, she's just a suicide because of where she is and the fact that there was drugs. So they just jumped to that.
Yeah. I went to a CrimeCon convention last year, and it was the first time I had attended, and there were panels and, different top presentations, and sometimes you could interact with the speakers and whatever, all these experts, but there were half a dozen cases that either CrimeCon was presenting or people from the audience would go up and ask the presenters about their personal family's case. And there were so many children, grown children, who the police had deemed their death as a suicide. But the common denominator that I noticed in all these cases was that the grown children had chosen to be around people of ill repute. They had bad association.
Yeah.
And whether that's drugs or what have you. And I got the impression from that CrimeCon convention that the detectives across the board just kind of dismissed.
Right.
They didn't put a value on that person's life because they felt like that person, I don't want to say deserved it, but it was just another
casualty, casualty of drug abuse or something like that. And they just said, well, that's it. They just write it off.
Right. So that very well could be the case here. Not that the Jessica was some, meth addict that was causing.
A friend of hers put it in a good way. She said that she was in a bad season of her life, which I thought, that comes and goes with a lot of people. It doesn't mean that she was like that for the rest of her life or that she'd always had these problems. She was in a bad season of her life.
Right. And I appreciated that the family, when they found out, that the police weren't kind of budging on the suicide thing, within, 60 days, they had went out and hired an expert in this field, a forensic expert. He handled high-profile murder cases. He actually worked on the Casey Anthony case to help them, look into see if there's anything that was
suspicious,
overlooked by the police that was obvious to someone else. So one of the things that I found most interesting in his findings was there was a photo, and I don't know where the photo comes from, but it's
no, it wouldn't be the mailman.
No, because this was a picture of her arm at the coroner's office, I would say, and it's an obvious shoe impression, like a footprint.
You see the treads,
but the treads from like sneakers or whatever it is. It's
like stamped
obvious
on her arm.
Yeah. And it's on the underside of her arm. I mean, there is a lot of spots and
other weird markings.
Other markings that could be related to
possible drug stuff.
Activity. I don't know.
I don't know.
But the obvious thing is someone stepped on her arm.
Yeah. And none of that was really looked into either that we know of, was it?
That we know of. That's what the expert was trying to bring to the attention is like, what's this on her arm? Why hasn't anyone investigated this? Because it was so obvious. The way she was found, there would be no explanation for this shoe print to be on her forearm.
Right. Right. And he also talked about a couple other things about, just how unlikely it would have been for her to have been strangled in that position because of the way her body was resting on the post, the weight of her body.
Yeah, I think he said the shoestring was going across her cheekbone or her jaw.
Right.
And her head was, leaning against the post. He also said the way her hands were positioned, it was like, I think one of them was in her purse.
He said it looked like they had been placed there, not that they fell there naturally.
And what he said about the knot, the way the knot was tied would have been almost impossible. Mind you, when we drove out there, this is, I don't want to say the boonies. It's not that far away from city life, but this subdivision, there's no street lights at night.
Right.
I mean, it's
dark.
so if this is happening sometime after midnight, 3 a.m, it's pitch black dark. So she would have had to walk barefoot. If her shoes are on the driveway, she had to walk barefoot all the way to through this yard that has sticks and
full of grass, full of weeds. It was overgrown.
Trees to get to this mailbox
and tie this perfect knot using 2 different shoelaces. And if you, I don't recommend anybody to look at the picture, but I saw a picture of the knot and it's tied at the very, very, very end of the shoelace where there's like no leeway. And it just seems impossible to have done that.
Yeah, I found a quote from this expert, which I'm just going to read. It says, "To me, this is a staged crime scene. And one thing you have to take into account is this is just within walking distance where she was visiting with her boyfriend. It's not like she drove into the woods and did this. One of the first things is the neatness of the knot tied at the end of the shoestring. It's almost at the end of both ends of shoestrings, and the knot is tied very neat at the end. So when she sits down to do this, how does she know how much slack that she's going to need in the string? Too much or not enough and everything for that to work, and then tie that from a sitting position." Very valid points that he brought out that, you know, allegedly, or it seems the police didn't take the time to consider those factors.
And one other thing that he brought out that I particularly thought was interesting was the fact that her hair, the shoestring was on top of her hair. She had long hair. I have long hair. Women with long hair, this is like universal. If you're putting on a necklace, if you're putting on a scarf, you lift your hair out of the way. You just do it without even thinking about it. It seems weird to me that she wouldn't have, if she was doing this herself, that she wouldn't have moved her hair out of the way to get the shoestring around her actual neck. Because, you know, I mean, like, to make as much use of the shoestring as she could have. It seems more likely that somebody put that on her and didn't think about moving her hair, to me. And I know that's just like a little tiny point, but it's something I think about as a woman with long hair. You would move your hair out of the way.
I just can't. I can't even imagine someone attempting this, like physically, like what they're. How they position them.
How do you see what you're doing? Any of it? It doesn't make any sense.
Pitch black dark. You're tying shoestrings, which are, you know, I'm impatient. I can't tie knots or, you know, little bitty things.
No.
It seems like it was a perfectly tied knot. It just seems very, very weird.
And then the blood. We talked about that there was blood spatter on her shoes that was found. Was that ever tested?
No. To date, it has not been tested.
That's weird.
But you know, there's blood on her shoes, which are located
away from her body.
Away from her.
Right.
So another red flag that you would think the police would have pursued. But they haven't. In fact, they gave the shoes and a couple other things back to the family. Like, so this goes kind of to the earlier part of the episode where we're talking about how the police immediately deemed it a suicide. And this is a supporting factor where they're like, okay, here's her belongings.
Which should be evidence.
Here's her purse. Here's her cell phone.
Right.
Here's her shoes. The purse, mind you, had a strap that was broken. It was like ripped off or somehow.
And that's suspicious too.
Yeah,
the forensics guy was talking about that. Like, what if that was used?
So she's going to walk barefoot with a
broken
strapless purse. Dang.
And they just give it back.
And they give it to the family, which I'm sure the family somewhat appreciates, but it was also missing a very important part, which was her clothes. They didn't bring her clothes back. It turns out the funeral home put the clothes in a biohazard bag and got rid of them. I'm assuming they burned them. Well, I mean, she herself was cremated. Jessica was cremated. I believe it was partially due to the financial reasons. You know, it's expensive to have a funeral. Yeah. I think they even jack them up more when it's unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a pre-planned, it's cheaper. But all those things, she was cremated, so they lost any kind of physical evidence on her body. But now they've lost her clothes,
and they lost the shoelaces.
There's no shoelaces. Were they in the bag of clothes that got disposed of?
I feel like those should not have been lost because there could have been some kind of touch DNA on them.
100%.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. And so I did talk to the family. I talked to Miss Linda this week and asked her about the shoes. And she said, yes, we still have them. I said, have they been tested? She said, no. So I offered to get with Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, who I've worked with, which is for maybe another episode. But when the pandemic started, I started doing some genetic genealogy. And Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, she's a renowned pioneer in the forensic genetic genealogy field. And so I reached out to her to ask her if she had any labs that she could recommend that the family could send the shoes to. So she emailed me today and gave me that information, which I have passed on to the family. So I'm hoping that, and it could be super expensive, so there may be some fundraising or something that the family has to do to make this happen. I'm sure there's people out there who are so interested in this case and that would
be willing to help. Yeah, good.
But for now, they haven't been tested. So if the blood is Jessica's, there's some things, obviously Jessica's body's no longer, so they would have to use some samples from the parents to make sure that it's hers. But if it's not hers, then they would be able to say, okay, this is not Jessica's. So who does it belong to, and why is it on her shoe?
I would love for
and
them to
there
test
are
that.
ways to do that with forensic genetic genealogy.
I wish they had the shoelaces that they could do that with.
Yeah.
But that's crazy to me that they just got rid of those clothes. I guess I'm thinking that they must have just been told it was a suicide, and they just
The funeral home just kind of went through probably what the police told them, and
they're like, oh, okay. But also the phone. That's also an interesting thing. That's something that's
a frustrating thing.
Yes, and the family has her phone. It was locked at the time of her death, and they have not been able to get it unlocked, even though they have made attempts. Apple will not release that information without
They've called the phone
passcode.
carrier. They've tried so many things.
And because, she was cremated, they didn't use her finger to unlock it. I wish that they had. That would have been...
If it was a finger...
I'm sure it probably
assuming
was.
so. Or if there was a code...
There's some kind of rumor, possibly. I don't know that it's true, that maybe her boyfriend had changed the passcode and won't reveal that. I don't know if that's 100% true, because I feel like if he had, they would have had to get that information from him, but I don't know. It's crazy, though, that her son received a text message from her phone at 3:29 a.m. I don't know what the text message said. I don't know.
And her son at this point is
around
a
19
late
or 20.
teenager. And this is a
Friday night.
I think it's a weekend. So I wonder if it was normal to get a text from... I wonder if that was a cause.
I don't know. Like, is this weird? Why is my mom texting me at
3 in the morning? And I think if memory serves it correctly, it was like basically, hey, I'm going to be hanging out with G another day or something like that.
But this timing is suspicious because the coroner said she would have died somewhere around 3 a.m. and this text was sent at 3:29. So did she send it? Or did somebody else pretend to be her and use her phone and text him?
If she did send it, and this is right at the time that she's going to take her life.
Suicidal, why would she send this, like, things are okay text?
Yeah, you would think
It's
you would
just
say,
weird.
I'm not. Because allegedly she told, was it the homeowner that she told that, life is too hard?
Yeah, the homeowner claims that he received a text from her after that fight saying that she was, like, tired of the pain.
Which would make more sense to send that at 3-something in the morning if that was the case. I don't know. I personally find the homeowner super suspicious.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the family and others may feel that way about her boyfriend, and he is. And then
I think there are multiple suspicious people in this case. The homeowner being one, the boyfriend being one. There were people at that house that night. We don't know who.
Oh, but let's not forget that there was a camera.
Bro, yeah.
So to add to the frustration, this house, even though it's not like a super
it's not a very nice house.
I mean, it's not terrible. But anyway, it's not. They don't take good care of it. Let's put it that way.
That's a good way to put it.
But they have this camera,
like a ring type camera,
that points directly to the mailbox.
Right.
So we have a camera that's going to highlight how she got there, when she got there. But when the police go and talk to the homeowner and ask for access to the footage, he comes up with various excuses as to why he can't give them the camera footage.
I don't know the code.
I think I may have taped over it.
I'm not sure it's even working.
Not sure it's working. So why he was allowed to just
okay thanks
for trying. Like, you seem like they would like have
pushed that,
gotten a warrant of some sort to retrieve it and like do their own forensic analysis of the video.
Yeah,
which
it could have helped a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's 3 a.m. It's dark. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how much you would have been able to see, but still, they could have tried.
Yeah, it just seems.
It's fishy.
Yes.
And then the family also said that none of the neighbors were questioned. Again, this is, the wee hours of the morning. It's in the country.
But she wasn't found until mid-morning, so they could have gone and talked to the neighbors then.
Yeah. Hello, did you hear anything? Did you see anything suspicious? No, they didn't even ask, like, anybody nearby anything.
Mm-mm. And then when the police showed up again, no one came out from the house to see what's going on. Obviously, to me, it's obvious that they knew what was out there, and that's why they didn't go out.
It's weird.
A lot of red flags.
I did read a quote from the homeowner, and he said that at first I'm paraphrasing this. He said that at first he didn't really think it was suicide, but now he's leaning that way. But he said, I think it's odd that, you know, she left my house around 6 p.m. and then she just stayed out there till 10 in the morning. And he says, and nobody would have seen her. He says that people would drive up and down that street to go to work and stuff in the morning. So that's weird too. Like, how did no one
Where was she
her?
from the time that the door allegedly was slammed?
Yeah.
And said,
there's like 9 unaccounted hours for her. And she just, stayed in the yard for 9 hours?
And there's no like gas station nearby or like, if she didn't have she must not have had transportation. No. She was calling her friend to come pick her up. Where was she?
I know that at that time the grass was super tall and weedy. I guess if somebody had driven by, they could have just, in the early hours of the morning, thought she was just out there looking for something in the grass, maybe. And people have this idea that Southerners are extremely neighborly. That's not always the case.
It used to be the case. When we were younger, we knew our neighbors and we would...
So maybe they just drove by.
But I don't know.
Or minding their own business or something. I don't know. But I think that's weird that nobody would have seen her. And back to something else you said too, earlier on, why the mailbox when there's all these trees? Why choose this mailbox to do this from? So just none of it adds up.
It's hard to put it all together with the shoestrings, the camera,
the footprint,
the evidence that was not treated as evidence. Mm-hmm. There's so many weird things in this case that it makes you really wonder if it was suicide. It was a super unique way of going about it.
An odd way to do it.
Yeah.
When there was there's so many other ways you could have done it.
Mm-hmm. And I just think with her personality being the way it was, she would not have wanted to
be seen that way.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
And that's kind of what her family has said all along. I did ask the family if her boyfriend attended the funeral, because to me that's kind of a telltale sign. Yeah. We asked the same thing in the Nancy Little case, and they said he did try to attend, but a family friend asked him to leave. The homeowner, on the other hand, didn't even attempt to attend the funeral. So to me, that says something about his character.
And the boyfriend, I know there was some suspicion on him. I mean, that's always the case. When someone dies, you kind of look at their significant other. But the boyfriend, G, he claims that he submitted DNA to investigators. And he even said there was an interview, a TV interview he gave. He says that he thinks something happened to her. I thought that was really interesting. Like, I mean, I agree. I think something happened to her too. I don't think she did this to herself. And of course, he is suspicious. I mean, he's a shady character. He's had drug problems. They had a volatile relationship. Later on, we found out that there was even a warrant for him for domestic violence against him. Another woman that he had dated filed.
Was that his alibi? That he was with her?
I don't know. It might have been. That sounds right
familiar
to me.
Well, I know she has since passed away. His girlfriend at the time.
So none of this stuff speaks well for him, right?
No.
But I think it's interesting that he's like, I think something happened to her, because I think that if he had done it, I don't think he would have been so willing to say that. I think he would have kept his mouth shut. So I'm not saying that I don't find him suspicious. I do, but I think that's...
Isn't this the interview he's talking to the TV reporter, and then he just all of a sudden just
running away.
He just runs off.
It was weird. It was a weird interview. He was going to court for that domestic violence case against him.
Yeah, I think Jessica, unfortunately, was the victim of
bad association.
Bad association, choosing, the wrong friends, the wrong people.
She had a big heart. It seemed like she wanted to help people.
Yep.
But, that's how it is. They rub off on you instead of the other way around most of the time.
Yeah. Again, it just makes me remember our parents really honing or trying to emphasize that to us about,
Right.
our choice of friends and what it could do. It's sad, especially when you're an adult, that you're making those types of decisions. But
what bothers me most, and I think what bothers you most, is the lack of effort by the police.
well, it seems that way. I mean,
it seems that way.
So, I mean, if G, her boyfriend, gave DNA to the police, they must have done something, at the beginning. But I don't know. It just seems odd if right away they're saying suicide and here's all her belongings and here's all this stuff, death certificate, boom, stamp.
Why would
suicide.
you give them DNA evidence if they immediately assume it's a
maybe?
suicide?
I mean, he's saying
he's
DNA.
saying that.
I don't know if the police have ever commented.
I don't know.
on that.
I don't like to criticize the police because I do know I could not do that job. I don't know their workload. I do. Maybe they were just ill-equipped to handle it. As we said earlier, Horn Lake's not known for violent crime. Maybe they just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the John Benet Ramsey case, where the police, it was like this town they didn't ever...
Little town, they didn't know what...
That wasn't
was
something
shocking.
they were used to.
Right.
It'd be different if it was in Memphis, where they're like, oh, it's another murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. Maybe they just were in over their heads. But I think Jessica went to school with some of the officers that worked there at the Horn Lake Police Department. And I think that's another thing that kind of bothers the family is where's the
effort.
The effort.
Yeah.
This should have been someone that they semi-cared about,
Right.
maybe, that they would put the effort into to look into it. I have reached out to two people that currently work with the law enforcement there to see if the case is considered closed or open. I haven't gotten a response back. I'm looking at my phone now.
And one
Nope,
other
not yet.
side point this is definitely like third, fourth hand information, but in the South, we're all like, it's a small town, friend of a friend of a friend. And so,
Rumor has it.
we were recommended this case. I was talking to somebody who was talking to somebody, and they recommended this case to us. I'd never heard of it, but she said that her father worked with the Horn Lake PD back in the day, and that her father said that this coroner on this case had a reputation for ruling cases as suicides, and that she'd had a friend who died suspiciously, and he ruled it as a suicide. Again, I do not know if this is true, but it's just a rumor. But I thought, whoa, that's
I know
not great to hear.
the coroner, his name was Jeffrey Pounders. He was he had been in that position for a really long time, and that was kind of his claim to fame was the opioids, addictions, and his concern for the community, because I guess this county in Mississippi
Has a high rate of
was the
death
highest
from
in the
that.
state
Yeah.
because of that. That being said, it does, seem a little odd that he would maybe deem so many cases as suicide.
If that's the case,
if
I don't know.
if they had other cases.
My radar went up though when I was told that.
It'd be interesting to look into that further.
But where is the case now? Like, where is it standing?
Well, all
How's
those
the family?
experts that you see on TV that the family had worked with are gone. And not gone that they've abandoned them necessarily, but they have other cases they're working. They've one of the guys moved out of state. Another one moved to go take care of their elderly parents. So they've kind of lost momentum from that support standard. Support, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll work. But the family really they need our support to help keep this case alive.
Right.
If you are inclined to believe that something nefarious happened to Jessica, there are ways that you can show support to the family. The family, they've set up a Facebook page. It's called What Happened to Jessica Johnson. So you can follow that. The family will respond to you within hours or days if you reach out to them, show support. The family is trying to pick up the pieces the best they can.
Yeah.
There's Jessica's son is 24 years old now. He's a father of two kids. He named the first one after his mom. Jessie, I believe, is the son's name. And Eden, her daughter, is 12 years old now. She's living with Jessica's parents. Jessica's parents have been married for 44 years, so she's got a good, solid family to
help raise her, and
love her, and keep her. They're keeping Jessica's memory alive, but they still need
closure.
Closure.
They're still grieving. Yeah. Till this day, they're still grieving. They need justice. They need some answers.
Because it's not just it's just a weird case with all these red flags that pop up all throughout it. It just seems like it deserves a fresh perspective, and it'd be nice, despite the national attention on this as well. I mean, this has been on
quite a few documentaries, quite a few YouTube shows about this.
Yeah, so it's not like it's some
I don't know how we didn't hear about it.
I don't know either. But I don't watch. I try not to watch the news that much because it's depressing.
Yeah, especially local.
There's no good news here. So her mom seems determined to keep this case in the forefront. So again, the Facebook page is called "What Happened to Jessica Johnson." So please do check that out.
Yeah, and again, we're going to wrap this up. We want to thank everyone for listening today. Please check us out on social media. We have a Facebook and Instagram account, Southern Fried Homicide Podcast. We'd love to hear your comments about the episode, any thoughts that you may have. If you have any recommendations for other cases that you would like us to look into, just please let us know. And thank you again, and join us again next time for more tales of the dark side of the South.